Good afternoon, Sarayim Tovim. This is a little bit later than usual. We had some fun around here, a power outage, so I had to catch up on some things. But here we are, power's back on, and it is Thursday afternoon. So this week we're going to be discussing Parshat Terumah, and I've entitled this A Model for Radical Tzedakah Initiatives of Sharing and Caring. I'm also going to be giving shout outs to members of my family from younger generations to show that, yes, we teach Midor Lador from generations, but it goes both ways. So we're going to begin with my eldest daughter, Yoella's 8-year-old, Adele, who at the ripe old age of 8 informed me earlier this year when we were determining what we would learn together during our weekly shiur, that it is very important to learn the book of Shemot, of Exodus, because this is the story of how we became who we are. So, weekly, more or less, I am sitting with my daughter Yoella's next to youngest daughter, and we are exploring the lessons of this book of the Torah. In so doing, we point out the differences of the stories of family and its generations from Bereshit, and how exactly we became who we are as a community in the narrative of Sefer Shemot. This is about our being a true community. Come, meaning with, unity, a shared sense of oneness. Now, let's consider, when do we really become the community? Is it when we travel together as did the sons of Yaakov? Is it when we accepted that God brings us together? Does it occur in the foxhole, so to speak, in this case in Mitzrayim, around shared trauma? Is it when we are rescued from harm in those narrow straits of Mitzrayim? Or is it when we receive the laws that bind us together? Or, contrary to those who think of Parshat Terumah as a letdown, after all these incredible occurrences, is it actually when we join together to create something beautiful that all will enjoy, that all will benefit from, and that will enrich the collective through the joint efforts of its individuals? This is the story of Parshat Terumah. We begin in Parak Chaf He, chapter 25. God speaks to Moshe, saying, Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yichuli Terumah me'et kol ish asher yidabenu libo tikhu et Terumati. God speaks to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and have them take for me, they should take for me, yichuli, Terumah, an offering, made kol ish asher yidabenu libo, from every individual who is so moved by his heart, tikhu, you should take Terumati, my Terumah. And this is the offering that you will take from them: zahav, kesef, nechoshet, gold, silver, copper, blue, crimson, purple, techelet, argaman, v'tolat, sheni, v'shesh izim, goat hair, ram skins, all of the materials, all of the stones, all of the resources that are used for lighting, for the oil, for beautification purposes. And with all of this, v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, they will make for me a mishkan, a dwelling place, a place where the Shekhinah, where my dwellingness will dwell, and I will be within their midst. Rashi says, when we read, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, asuli mishkan, they will make in my name, va'asuli shmi, beit kedusha, a house of holiness. I would put there, I would add that this kedusha is inclusive of every person and every gift, the total effect of which is what brings kedusha to the collective and the individuals. Everybody's participation is what ultimately brings the shared result. As we continue in our parsha, we are given the many dictated instructions about exactly how to build what will be the center of this community, a center in which all are vested, a center in which all have contributed something for the well-being of the collective, and the center where God individuals and the collective, will meet with a shared goal and function. Aviva Sorenberg notes the abrupt transition between all of the awe-inspiring events of the previous Parshat and this Parsha, which may seem more suited to a building architecture and design journal of its time. How do we explain this? Sorenberg explains that Ramban, Nachmanides, teaches that the explanation of this wonderfully, seemingly magical place, this Mishkan, in which the presence of God will dwell, should be beautiful and as awe-inspiring as all that has just happened. In other words, contrary to our lives, where what is not visible somehow seems less present, here the visible should make the awe-inspiring events that were felt more visible. The difference is the full participation of all of the members of the community in creating this together. Sorenberg explains, in Ramban's reading, the idea of a sanctuary for God in their midst is a token of transformation. After the revelation and the covenant, they have now become fit vessels for this presence of God. Sorenberg also refers to Kasuto, who explains that as we now move forward, there was a chance of moving further and further away from the site of the theophany that so changed and linked the Bnei Yisrael to each other and to God. The intentionality and the attention to each and every detail of the Mishkan was to indicate that they would not indeed do this, and instead would be those vessels for the presence of God, ready to receive and fulfill all of the teachings that would glorify them as Am Segula, as a Goy Kadosh, as Mamlechet Kohanim, the treasured nation, the sanctified people, the kingdom of priests, and that they would indeed be worthy of these many terms of endearment. Kasuto shows how the link between the Mishkan and the Bnei Yisrael serves as the first inherent linkage between them and God as a binding one. God made the Exodus happen. God gave the Ten Commandments. Now they are doing this at the instructions of God to create a presence that represents God. Sorenberg sees the instructions here as complicating the vision of this gathering posts. She teaches in her book, The Particulars of Rapture, Reflections on Exodus, as follows. The vision serves an ambiguous purpose. In some sense, it furthers the building project, but at the same time, it deconstructs the very possibility of such a project. Whatever guidance it provides, it is clearly not of the construction manual type, illustrating for practical clarity. Rather, it is an anti-Mishkan vision, exacerbating Moshe's original skepticism. Dynamically, the Midrash has followed an unusual course, beginning with a relatively unproblematic solution, the minimalist tent, which we will see later, the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and progressing to a sense of quandary which is not entirely resolved in God's final gnomic utterance, if you will make what is above below, then I will dwell there. Vision does not clarify, it complicates. To put this into a cultural context, the lavish nature of the sanctuary for the collective is something we have witnessed throughout history. The importance of this center has been an important means of survival for so many throughout centuries of threatened existence. To make these sites special, to sanctify the sanctuary, so to speak, has been a known practice and has indeed resulted in some of the most beautiful architectural wonders and spaces in so many parts of our world, dedicated as gathering posts for a people and their God. As time will go on, these sanctuaries will change in their focus and importance due to many different factors, including destruction, mobility of populations, and so many other elements. As Jews, we note that our deeds become the substance of these links. For example, tefillot and building the Beit Knesset, our prayers and building our gathering post, our synagogues, will replace the Beit Knesset, the Beit HaMikdash, which will ultimately take over from the Mishkan. Our deeds of tzedakah, of sharing and caring with others, will be the substance of our continuing to make voluntary and meaningful donations to the collective, as is the case here in Terumah. So here we find our marching orders, so to speak. If Terumah is not really just about the materials, the structures, and their practicality and replicating what is above, below, then what precisely is it about? Let us consider the following factors. Is working together for a shared goal enough to make a community? Is this when the Bnei Yisrael become a community? Due not to external forced factors, not to trauma, not to gifts of God, so to speak, but rather indicated by a shared goal in which all participate. 2. Each one is told to bring generously according to their means. This will be repeated often when we speak of further iterations and development of what we define as Terumot. And we will see in the end of Shemot where Moshe has to say to them, enough, you've been way too generous. We're already there. 3. Is this model one of where we have the ideal or the idyllic in mind, but work for a practical and realizable result? And 4, is the beauty of the product found in the lavish colors and beautiful objects explained in great detail, not only in this Parshat, but to be repeated later? Or is the beauty found in the efforts that go into the craft? Think about the difference between a home and a house. Is every beautiful house also an embracing and welcoming and therefore beautiful home? Which do we prefer? Regarding the true value of what is intended, our Hasidic masters teach that the different materials reflect our differences as individuals. And when we come together, that is where beauty and God dwell together. They explain. Every created entity has a spark of godliness within it, a pinpoint of divinity that constitutes its soul, its spiritual function and design. When we utilize something to serve the Creator, we penetrate its shell of mundanity, revealing and realizing the divine essence of the visible thing. Thus, we elevate these sparks, reuniting them with their source. This is the way we bring what is above to us below. And in so doing, we elevate ourselves. So how do we apply this teaching today? We must begin by looking at the context of our own realistic existence and think about how we apply these concepts in that reality. We know very well that we have beautiful places of worship, some more basic and others quite lavish. At the same time, we as Jews cannot ignore that there are those who are suffering greatly, while others continue to increase exponentially in personal wealth, some of whom will contribute to many of these grand structures in which we worship, with their names to be affixed in prominent places. And at the same time, those who are so compromised in their most basic of needs may not have access to these communal gathering posts. How do we reconcile these very different dynamics? How do we talk about the increased and continually increasing rift between the haves and the have-nots? What is our responsibility in terms of addressing this inequity? We acknowledge that many of us throw around the term tzedakah very loosely and too often to refer to anything from donations to a food pantry to building our large and luxurious structures with our financial resources. But does this tzedakah conform to what it is intended to be? I am not taking away from the different interests and different goals that people have. However, what I am suggesting is that we be intentional about our tzedakah and about the sources that we give to in terms of degrees of need. In our reality today, let us consider the following factors. 1, there is clearly a disconnect between those that have and those who do not have. According to the statistics provided in 2022, 11.6 of Americans live below the poverty line. Almost half of the worldwide population lives below the American-defined poverty line. The most wealthy 1% of the world population accounts for twice as much wealth as the entire other 99%. This situation has exacerbated exponentially, and as so much wealth goes into building beautiful and magnificent structures, and they are, what do we do about the too many people who are suffering from home and food insecurity, the most basic needs, not to mention inaccessibility to health care and a reasonable standard of living by the most modest of measures? 2, I am presently learning Hilchot Maser from Rambam, and have recently completed Hilchot Terumah in his Mishnah Torah. This important text from the 12th century goes into great detail about what belongs to a person who grows resources, considered a strong indicator of wealth at the time, and what is given to the community as Terumah. What is Maser, the 10th? What is the first 10th? The Maser Sheni, the second 10th. And what is the Maser Ani? That part which goes to those who do not have. Everything is subject to these communal well-being taxes, if you will, as are the various rules and regulations about what parts of the growth of one's field one is entitled to keep and what parts go to other members of the community in need. Clearly, there's a strong sense of communal responsibility and sharing and caring, or the acts of tzedakah, as well as adaptation to what community was as a collective of individuals in various states of food and home need security at the time. 3, Rambam also teaches in his Mishnah Torah that every person in the collective participated in the general mitzvah of tzedakah, with those who could only give to the food pantry and trusted to do so. To put this in today's language, and those who can contribute to the building funds, bedek habayit, and its upkeep and beautification, entrusted to do so. By each and every person participating in meaningful ways in this scaffolded model of contributing to the community and its well-being, there was honor, there was shared responsibility, and each person was imbued with a sense of pride in their membership in that community. When one's destiny and success is tied up with yours, it is intended that all work collectively to ensure the well-being of all is best. In our Parsha, this is the easy stuff. All come together to create something beautiful. Maybe this was the intention of Terumah by showing that every person is an important participant in the final product. There's both individual pride and collective achievement. This is community. As we continue in the coming weeks and months, we will learn the hard work of ensuring that this beauty is enjoyed by and accessible to all. The question for us is, how do we do that in our world, in consideration of the stark reality that presents too many challenges, with the rift between the haves and the have-nots continuing to widen into an irreparable gulf of inequality? For Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono L'Shalom, Parshat Terumah is about Terumah as the first form of Tzedakah. And that Tzedakah is based on 4 core concepts, which will continue to be developed throughout Jewish law. 1, Judaism's approach to the ethics of material wealth is to be noted. We are not ascetics. We do not reject the notion of wealth and resources, but rather want to consider how we use our blessings and the belongings that are bestowed upon us for the good of many. 2. Responsibility is a value and calling for every Jew, reflected in the many practices that we will learn about our people as an agrarian-based society, and as our ancestors in that society plowed and planted their fields, ensured that all in the community had food and basic needs through the community funds collected, and were required to share significant portions of their own personal wealth, the produce of their fields, to achieve that. 3. Tzedakah can be seen as a vehicle for spiritual and moral growth, as we realize that what we have comes from God, and that those of us who are so blessed with resources will grow and gain so much as we share them with others. As human beings, we are created b'tselem Elokim, and we note that God never has less because of what God bestows upon us, but rather has an endless amount of resources to spread around. As we are created in the image of God, b'tselem Elokim, let us take that lesson to heart. And finally, 4. The value that is at the very core of the concept of tzedakah in Jewish thought and practice is the dignity of the human being. We all know the teaching today that lack of justice anywhere is injustice everywhere. How can we in good conscience put our children to bed, feed our community, provide lovely davening spaces, and not be concerned about the too many of our fellow human beings who do not have these basic opportunities or needs met in their lives? Rabbi Sachs teaches that it is truly a struggle to find an appropriate English translation for the Hebrew word tzedakah. He states that some translate it as charity, for which there is another more appropriate Hebrew word, nidabot, by the way. Yet the root of the word has the meaning of justice, tzedek. For Rabbi Sachs, neither is sufficient, because conceptually tzedakah really encompasses both of these ideas, despite their seeming contradictory in nature. Justice is dispensed by a judge or a king. Charity is a gift of love given by one human being to another. But God plays both roles in our lives, and tzedakah brings us to relate to our fellow human beings as well as bringing God above what is above to our lives, just as we do with the building of the Mishkan. We use the materials to bring what is above below. We join together to bring God's presence into our Mishkan, into our community. And we can do individual deeds of tzedakah to further the goal. I personally have always taught that tzedakah is caring and sharing with our resources. This, I believe, is justice charitably dispensed. I have taught this to my students, to my children, and to all in my circles. And now, my children are returning the favor by teaching me. My daughters, Rachie and Tali, and their wonderful wives, Mimi and Liz, are involved in radical tzedakah initiatives. And we are learning about them and beginning to get involved with them as well. It is causing all of us to reconsider how we truly and intentionally care and share with our resources. I will end by sharing just 3 of the many initiatives that are active and available for our participation, for our giving of Terumah, if you will, to help enable the collective beauty of our Jewish community and our human family. 1. Jews for Racial and Economic Justice is a member-led grassroots fundraising committee. They are dedicated to the work of deepening our knowledge of grassroots fundraising. They state, "We are looking forward to exploring what our Jewish traditions have to say about money and wealth redistribution, how different justice movements have used grassroots fundraising in history, and more." As a second option, Resist, and you can find all of these online, has fought for equal radical social change. In 2023, Resist writes, "Let's continue to care, care for ourselves, care for those in need, so that we can continue our important work together for years to come. And the third, just among many that I could cite here, Jews United for Justice mobilizes Jews and the Jewish community to move our region closer to social, racial, and economic justice. By advancing campaigns for immediate and concrete improvements in people's lives, we develop leaders, build our base, shift the consciousness of our community, and alter the relationship to power. We seek to work in partnership with organizations made up of and or accountable to those who have personal experience with the challenges we are hoping to address. We have helped win higher minimum wages, paid family leave, police accountability, affordable housing, and other things as well. We continue to move resources and power into the hands of people of color who have been systematically blocked out of the political process to benefit the ultra-wealthy and their interests. To power our advocacy efforts, we build a Jewish community that is dedicated to pursuing justice, tzedek, tirdof, right? Understands the key issues in our area and has the tools and skills to make that change. Oh, I can imagine that I see the shaking heads and hear the outcries. There she goes with her liberal agenda again. But before anyone accuses me of being too liberal, remember that Terumah, Tzedakah, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, and the many rules governing one's fields and produce are precisely about correcting and addressing inequity. This is as much and as fundamental to our Jewish law as anything else that we consider to be part of our Jewish souls. These practices and rules and regulations are repeatedly spelled out and explained in the Torah, in the Gemara, in Rambam's Mishnah Torah, v'chulei, and so on. This is truly something for all of us to take to heart as we work together to build a more beautiful community and bring God's ideal into our reality while ensuring the accessibility of all to that community in the best way we can. Shabbat Shalom to all. Lihitraat.